Hello and welcome to this tour of REFM's mixed-use apartment multifamily building ground-up development Excel template. This is Bruce Kirsch, the creator of the model, and this is the standard product version. Let's go ahead and get started on the navigation homepage. This is a sophisticated model and a relatively large model. It has 18 tabs. And because it has so many tabs, we have a hyperlink system, which allows us to navigate around the template in a very easy manner, where on each tab in cell Alpha 1, we have a link to take us back to the navigation homepage. Now we'll move over to the Assumptions Input tab. And we have purposefully zoomed all the way out on this tab. We've formatted it such that if you have two screens, you can allow the Excel window to span across both of those screens, and you have, in effect, a left-hand screen page and a right-hand screen page. Let's go ahead now and zoom in on the top left box here, which is the building profile. One of the things that you notice right away is at the very top, we have a dedicated section for checks. And if all of the checks are green, that means there's nothing that needs to be looked into. But if there are one or more red shaded checks, those items do need to be looked into. So currently it's saying that the total allocation of soft costs does not equal 100%. So that's something that we will need to make sure that we fix and then double back and make sure that the check has turned green. Let's go ahead and step into the building profile section. This section identifies the characteristics of the site and the building to be built on the site. I'm going to put in some illustrative values here that will allow us to run an analysis. And I'm going to skip over items that are not critical for calculation, that are just informational only. I will put in 2,500 rentable square feet of retail, and then move over to the dimensions of the garage. And last, put in square footage for storage. Currently, the unit mix is reporting no units, and that's because we haven't entered any information there yet. So that's the next thing that we will do, and we'll just click on this to take us there. The Unit Mix tab shows a summary at the very top, and it's summarizing the two matrices, one for affordable or rent-controlled units, and the other for market rate units. Every line item in these unit mixes is based on choices that exist in a drop-down menu, and those choices can be overridden or added to in the tables that sit below the unit mixes. Now I'll enter in some illustrative values in time-lapse. With values entered in, we now see our building-wide averages for unit size, rent per square foot per month, and the totals for the unit count and rentable square footage, and monthly revenues of roughly $181,000. Now let's return to the Assumptions tab. Now we'll make some inputs for the project timing, and we'll do some of this in time-lapse. We'll assume a 15-month construction schedule and 2 months lead time to the first C of O, and 3 months to stabilization after the last unit is leased. For the absorption, we can put in any pre-leasing that we want to show, and then the average monthly absorption rate. And that's both for the affordable units as well as the market rate units. Last, we'll put in an assumption for the timing of when the retail tenant TI payment is made and the duration over which those allowances are given, which will then dictate the rent commencement. Next, we'll move to the Uses of Funds section and get some values inputted for our project budget. And we'll do, again, some of these in time lapse. So before any financing costs, we have a total development cost of roughly $18.5 million. Next, let's move to the sources of funds. We'll start with inputting the equity coming from the sponsor and the investor. And next we'll fill in the senior loan, which we back solve to by clicking this macro button. And that gives us a rough capitalization of 40% equity and 60% debt. Now we'll move to the cash flow inputs. And we see that the rents in today's dollars are showing coming from our unit mix tab. And now we'll make inputs related to growth and gross rent deductions in time lapse. And then do the same for operating expenses, as well as for the growth rates on operating expenses and real estate taxes. Last, we'll make inputs for the retail space operating expenses, as well as their real estate taxes, and then inputs for operating expenses for vacant space. Next, we'll make our inputs related to the retail space. As well as for the equity JV waterfall. And now that we have our property level operating inputs made, we see we have graphs for our EGI and NOI for the apartments and parking, as well as NOI for the retail. Next, we can proceed to the refinancing. And last, we move to the section for disposition, putting in an exit cap rate, making any adjustments for real estate taxes, and doing the same for the retail component. And now that that's completed, we can see initial returns reported to us, but we need to remember that we have to go to our check section to make sure that everything is correct. And so we see we have a little bit more work to do before we can rely on those returns. First is we need to rebalance the senior loan. And the next is we need to make sure that our soft costs are totaling to 100%. And then revisit our checks. And we now see that they're all showing green. And now we can look at our returns and rely on them for this run of the analysis.